Sorry about that. Okay. The RESTful Web API. This is me. Hello again. This is the same talk I've given, well, almost the same talk as last year. I'm going to talk about what's in the Web API, give you some examples of things we can do with it, show the many different ways we have to prove our identity to the API. Talk a little bit about how we do different forms of content negotiation and language and CORS, cross-object, cross-domain request sharing. Talk about different things which can trip us up when we're trying to use the Web API. Oh. Better? A little better? Beep, beep. There we go. Okay. So there we go. I will never tire of this joke. It's a RESTful web service. Okay. So 50% new stuff this year, 50% same as last year. 2 years ago, the API endpoint was called Services 80. Then last year it was Services 83. And now we have officially become version 1, API v1. And stuff, we've added a bunch more stuff, so now it actually works. And it covers almost all of SuperOffice, all our APIs. We have conditional gets and puts. We support different, so dealing with languages, and we support online properly. So, and it's no longer hidden behind a feature toggle. It's enabled for all of the 8.1 releases, so it's out working in online. It's working on the 8.1 release that we shipped yesterday. So it's live. And let's see if I can let's see, we can pull up. This is our production site. This is SuperOffice's SuperOffice. Oh, wait, it disappeared. Don't do that. Come here. Yeah. And if instead of logging in, I go up on the top and say, SuperOffice /API. We get an API endpoint. Woohoo! And this is our production site, so you can go talk to that if you have a password. Okay. So who's used the REST API at all since last year? Some of you? So many? The Web API is essentially just, it's a reskinning of what's in the Services API. So it's not magical or special in any case. All the stuff that you can do in the Web API, you can also do with WCF, the web services. It's just nicer and easier. We have all of the agents, so all the things which are in the SOAP API, they are also in the REST Web API. Or they're not in the REST part of the API. That's the stuff over here. This is kind of the REST-ish part. This is not REST-y. This is just all of the existing WCF SOAP agents. They're exposed as little API endpoints that you can call. But they are not REST-like. They don't represent entities in the same way. They don't provide the HTTP verbs and so on. But they're there so that you can call them from your apps without having to use SOAP. So, but I will ignore most of that stuff. But if there's functionality that hasn't been exposed in the REST API, you can always go dig it out of the agents. But I'm going to focus more on these things, the lists and entities and other things. So what's in the API? Well, first thing, we've got documentation in the API now. So it documents itself. So you saw, if I go to the endpoint, I get a little sort of web page that shows me a list of versions. And if I hit the endpoint for a particular version, I can, where did you go? There you are. Then I can go get more documentation and say, oh, give me the. Okay, that was not what I was hoping for. Go back to this one and click. There you go. And it'll go load more documentation. It'll, and we actually provide, there's a, what they call a Swagger or Open API file behind this that's that defines kind of all the operations and provides documentation on the parameters and sort of verbs that you need to use. And this file is standardized, so you can use this, the definition behind this to generate a nice website, but you can also use it to generate proxies or your own classes or clients. So there's a whole bunch of code generators out there that'll take this and turn it into JavaScript or TypeScript or Java, Python, PHP, whatever you like. So this is kind of a nice overview and lots and lots of documentation that describes the how to talk to the API and so on. So the API will hopefully explain itself to you. Good? Yes? No? It's like. So that's for humans. If we go off and request the same things, but say we would like this in a more machine type format, more like a JSON file, then it will oblige us by giving us JSON back with roughly the same information. So if we hit the API endpoint, it'll give us a list of what versions and the URLs to the version 1 endpoint and what time, what's the build number of this version of NetServer and so on. And if we go look at the API version 1 endpoint, it'll give us a list of all of the sort of URLs that it supports and what operations it supports, and also documentation on what those operations actually do. So using this, you should be able to build a nice little test out, figure out what operations are available and if they're supported or not on this particular installation. Okay. So what's in the API? We have all our major entities: appointment, contact, document, person. We have foreign keys. We have all the archives. So all the archive providers are provided, sort of exposed through a nice little endpoint. We have all the different built-in lists and custom lists, dashboards, licenses, user preferences, products, there's members and stakeholders, strings, since in the translation service, it could be useful. If you want to sort of get strings that you can put in your own user interface, you can go ask for translations from us instead of having to build your own. User-defined field layouts, you can sort of modify the layouts using the REST API. And of course, all the existing agents. So, for example, favorites we haven't gotten around to doing that, but favorite agent is in there, so you can use that. So by REST, I mean these things are treated as entities, as objects that you can go get one object, you can do some modifications, you can put it back onto our the same endpoint, the same URL, and it'll be stored for you. You can the idea in REST is that you have URLs to things, and you can manipulate them using the different verbs in HTTP. So you get or put or delete a thing, and it will disappear. So for example, if we want a get all the contacts, we say get, blah, 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 API version 1 contact. And that'll give us a list of all of the contacts. And it gives us the list in, well, it first gives us a little sort of metadata link, and then there's a value property with an array of all of the different sort of, properties on contacts. And this is actually the contact archive, provided as a simple list. And we can add some extra parameters to say, like, well, I don't want all the contacts, I want a particular one. And I want just a couple of fields. So I can say, blah, 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 question mark, dollar filter equals, and then name begins T in quotes, and select the contact ID and name. And then suddenly, okay, I just get the ones which match those criteria. So what's that? That's an example of an OData provider. OData is a standard that Microsoft came up with for exposing entity framework sort of, databases via URLs. So you can do simple queries, essentially. And we've taken that language and kind of mapped it onto the archive provider system. So you can go to the archive endpoint and you can specify any archive provider you've got a name for. And you get results back from that. And contact is essentially the endpoint there is saying, is exactly the same as the find contact archive. It's just a nicer way of sort of, you go to the contact endpoint and you expect to find a list of contacts. So what we say, well, that's the archive provider to use for that. So you don't have to know that, oh, that is a find contact archive provider. You just know. Go to the contact endpoint, you get a list of contacts. But you can specify what columns you would like, what restrictions. You can do order by, you can select chunks of it. And this is a standard. You could actually use this and hook this Excel up to this. There's like different OData clients that will understand and talk to this, and they mostly work. Like all standards, there are many interpretations. This is one. Is anyone familiar with OData? Anyone used that before? Yep. And one meh. Yeah. One challenge for us is that some of our column names have slashes in them. Slashes do not work well in XML. JSON doesn't care so much about that because all field names are quoted, but slashes in XML don't work so well. So we do a little transformation to sort of say, okay, slashes turn into double underscores, colons turn into this underscore X thing. But as long as you stay away from the XML serialization, this JSON works much better. So we stick OData on all kinds of collections. So for example, contact and person are both archives, essentially, OData providers, archive providers. And those will give you all the persons. And similarly, for one particular contact, it's very handy to be able to say, oh, for this contact, give me the list of persons on that contact. So there's like contact 123/persons. That'll give me the list of persons that have contact ID 123. So there's like a whole bunch of sub-archives, essentially, queries that we can sort of automatically set up for you and parameterize appropriately. So, API v1 person gives us all persons. Contact 123/person gives us just the persons that are on that particular contact. Seems fairly obvious, right? But it's all essentially the same archive provider under the covers, just parameterized for you. Questions?
If you ask for all the contacts,
I think we top out at 10,000 or something like that. There's like there's some limit baked into the archive provider system. And I think we also put in like a limit on that, on top of that. But then if I've done things correctly, there should next link should show up at the end, saying like, oh, go ask for the next one using this link. So if we get a particular contact, get contact 41, we get back a JSON object because we asked for JSON. And it's essentially the same entity as you would get from the WCF. You know, it has a table right object and or a table right property, field properties, and then all the fields that you know and love from the SOAP API are here, just as nice little strings instead. So it's name, department, blah blah blah. Created in 2002, updated 2002, so on. HTTP supports a couple of tweaks. You can say, give me this contact, but only if it's been modified since this date. And the date format there is specified in the HTTP specs. You can say, okay, so this is what they call a conditional get. Like, give me this thing only if it's been changed. In this case, it hasn't. It was last changed in 2002, so it hasn't been changed. So we get back HTTP status says 304 not modified, which basically means that the copy that we have locally is still good. Like it hasn't been modified since the time we got it. So okay, we don't need to get a new one. So there's no that cuts down on the amount of data we have to transfer and so on. So that works. And that works for all the major entities on in the REST API. Updating is similar. Like we'd say put to do an update. And we specify that we would like JSON back. And here's a JSON object with all the values, blah, blah, blah. And we get back kind of, okay, good. Here's the result of the update. Here's the updated data back. Now, if we didn't have permission, we'd get an error code instead. But you know, assuming we had permission to actually update this contact, we get back 200 OK, and the new content. It's like, OK, we've saved this. So there'd be like a new updated date and so on. And similarly to conditional get, there's a conditional put. It says, update this thing, but only do it if it hasn't been changed since this particular timestamp. So if someone else has changed it in the meantime, don't do our update. So this is baked into HTTP. This is not something we've come up with. This is like part of the specs. And so in case if someone has updated it, then we get back an error code that says 412 precondition failed. Is this useful for anyone? No? Yes? Okay, a couple of people nodding. Good. Okay, that makes the week I spent doing that worth it. If we want to create a new contact, we post, and we don't post to a particular ID. We haven't allocated an ID for it yet. So we do post to the contact endpoint, and we say, here's our content. Give us JSON, please. And it will allocate a new ID for us and return that ID, and all of the other fields, of course. So it does the save and then says, okay, here's your value. And if there's something important, there's a required field that's not filled out or something, we'll get back an error code instead, saying you forgot to fill out this thing. Does that make sense? Yeah. It's quite straightforward. We can go get pictures, and we'll get back the picture, as one would hope. So you can say get v1 person, some person ID /image, and we'll get back the image in a sort of the expected format. We get the raw data. We don't get it base 64 encoded or in some JSON structure. It's like just, no, here's the image, which is what you would hope for. Yep.
Does that have a put as well?
Yes, of course. You could put back to the image, and it will update you, store a new image on it. So that's exactly how it should work. One would hope. You could, actually, in fact, you could do put or post. Like in that case, it updates it in either case. You can also do multi-part form uploads. So if you do a little form that posts to person image, you can upload a file essentially from a HTML form straight to the endpoint, and it'll store that. That used to work, at least. It should still work. Documents. So this is, you have document, the entity, the sort of JSON structure that tells you like what's the description, what document template have we selected, what's our reference, and so on. So if we go get one particular document by ID, we'll get back a nice structure that says, like, here are the fields that you filled out on that document. But then if we go get the /content, we get back the actual document, like the contents of that's the MS Word in this case, well, binary data. So simple enough. So, of course, how do we change that? If I have a new document, how can I change it? Well, I do put. So I put back to the content, and here's my new document content, and it sends us back not the same document, but it sends back the entity. So that's a little unexpected, but essentially, when you update the content, the document plugin can decide to change, like, the file name, or basically change anything in the sort of data fields of that particular document. So it sends back out, here's what we know about the state of the document at this point. But it has also saved the content. So when you get it, you'll get back the updated content. Okay? And then finally, there's a tweak here where once you've uploaded an entity, like you created a document entity, essentially, a document object, you've set a document template, saying, like, I want to use this particular template, and that defines a set of content. But it doesn't create a document content until we say post. So we can say post to document 123 content, and we don't really have to say anything else. We just sort of trigger the net server to kind of take the template content and do the substitutions and things on it, and then that gets dumped in there for us. Then we can go get on document 123 content and get the resulting document. So fairly simple. Questions? Wishes? No? Lists? Let's see. If we go to the list endpoint, we get a list of all the lists in the system. Quite nice. This has changed quite a bit from last year. Last year, this was a lot simpler. Now it's more useful and more consistent. So each list has essentially this little block which says, like, the name and is it been deleted or not? Is it a custom list? Does it have headings in use and so on? Is it a built-in or a custom user-defined list? We filter out deleted lists by default, so you don't need to see deleted items, but you can sort of stick on a parameter that says include deleted, please, and then it will ship you back the deleted items as well. We don't do hard deletes on lists or list items. And then I can specify a list name, so category, for example. So give me a list category, and in this case, it'll give me back the description of the list, not the list items. That's a change from last year. You can also use the ID instead of the name of the list. You could say /list99, and you get back the same thing. And that's handy for user-defined lists and so on. But then if we say /items on the end of that, then we get the items. So that here again we have we hide deleted items, so they don't show up by default. You can say $include deleted equal true, and you get back deleted items as well. And this is just a flat list of all the items in the list. And of course, for some we have headings. So there's like a list of headings. So you can say, here's heading 1, 2, 3. You can post or put back to the headings. Similarly with items, you can post to the items or put to the items to update lists. If you're allowed, like you have to be administrator, have list admin function right in your role in order to do updates. If you try and are not allowed, you'll get an HTTP error back saying no update for you. And then if we have a particular list item, so item 2 is one of the list items, it has a headings property on it, which tells us, okay, this list item is included in which ones are the headings. So in this case, it's like, okay, this list item 2 goes under sales, since sales is here and it's selected. Question? Yeah. We'll come to that, but you can get it parsed for you, or you can get it raw. Okay, so, but normal it's raw. Well, normal depends on what header what you ask for. I think by default it should be raw, but I. Yeah. Well, let's see. We can. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah, we'll cover that a bit later on. Okay. Authentication. We do HTTP authentication in the way it's normally done. So if you do send off a request with nothing, you get back HTTP error says unauthorized, not allowed. You must provide authorization header in most cases. Turns out there are exceptions to this, of course, but if we provide a authorization header and there are different parameters we can put in there. In this case, we say basic, and that's the username, password, and then just base 64 encoded. Then we get back, assuming the password and username is correct, we'll get back OK. And what the server has then done is it has done its login and gone to the database, checked out that your password is correct, and then read the data and shipped it back to you. So pretty much like every other HTTP API out there, yeah? So we support 4 different ways of authorizing. There is no authorization, which is a very special case. It basically applies only to SuperOffice. Basically, if you are living on the same server as the CRM installation, and you have access to the cookies of that installation, and the user has logged in, then you don't have to log in. Then you can sort of you can provide a special header and say like I want to use the same session as the client that is already logged in. So you can piggyback off the existing kind of web client session. But there's a whole bunch of preconditions in order for that to work. For most other cases, there's like a basic authentication where you base64 encode the username and password. That works for on-site. It's not allowed in online. They would like you to use access tokens, OAuth access tokens in online. That means you go through SuperID and get an access token from that. We'll go through that. And there's also SO ticket. So if you already have a ticket from somewhere, you can provide that as a authorization header, and it will be accepted. So we'll take a look at that. So let's see. So it says here. Yeah, we still only do implicit flow OAuth. Hansu would very much like to do more, like different flows, but at the moment it's just the implicit flow, same as last year. So there's no refresh tokens or other sort of.
Is there a recommended way to access APIs for server side?
From server side, use SO ticket. Yeah, so you'd use SOAP to go talk to the SuperID, get a system ticket basically from that using the SO principal endpoint. And once you have a ticket, you can use that to talk to the the REST API.
And can you refresh that token?
The tickets are self-refreshing, so they whenever you use them, they refresh for another 6 hours or something. So let's see. All right. Let's try doing this. Come here. Come here. Excellent. Okay. So let us talk to some different APIs. So if I'm talking to the API endpoint, requires no authentication. Like there's having access to the sort of metadata doesn't require any special magic. So I can go and talk to version 1 and so on. And similarly, so this is an online installation. I can go talk to a on-site one I have set up already. Research.superoffice.net/EW2017. There we go, and it's gone to sleep. So let's see. So far, so good. If we go talk to contact 2. It says, not authorized. You must log in with something. Similarly here, if we say v1/contact2. This one. And you notice here it says, okay, you can use basic or SO ticket. While over on the online side, it says, nope, you can use SO ticket or bear. So depending on sort of how your site's configured, it'll tell you what's acceptable. So in this case, let's see, we can say basic author. Oh, looky. So this is for my on-site installation. So here I can use username and password. So let's see, this is our little test site. So there's like no magic here. We can say send. And boom, we get back data. Somewhere deep in here, there's there we go. Ooh, name state 0 database. Lovely. So now if we have, let's see, if I am lucky and I have a if we're very lucky, this ticket will work. So I could say, over here on the headers, it says, see, there's our little very small username and password, base64 encoded. If I instead say, you did not, authorization, SO ticket, big ticket number. That also works. Yay. On the online side, we have to go off and get a, let's see, we can come back here. We're off on the online side. We need to talk to SuperID and get an access token and so on for it to actually work. But there's the no authentication version, where if your app is sitting on the same server as the web application, a CRM web, then there's a secret hidden field on the web application, and also a cookie that contains kind of a random number, a random value. And you can, if you can read that, either from the cookie or by being part of the CRM web application and reading it from the hidden field, then you can add that as a header, XSSRF token with that value, and you do not add an authorize header. So if you say authorize me as something, then all of this stuff is off. If there's no authorized header and we find an XSSRF token, if that token matches the one that is expected, the one that's sort of used, generated for that particular user's session, then we say, okay, you're allowed to come in as part of the existing user's session. But of course, the precondition here is there must be a session. There must be so your web browser has to be logged in. You have to log in as the user. So here, for example, if we go to this one, if we go here, and at this point, there's still no session. There's no authentication. So if I try to do a sort of a request here with no username, with no authorization, it's going to say, well, no, there's no session here. You can't come in. But after I've logged in, now a session exists on the server, and we generate a this XSRF token. XSRF for cross-site request forgery. It's basically preventing random requests from coming in and say piggybacking on the session. So hidden away inside the in here. So if we see if we can find. Cookies. Let's see. There we go. See, there's a XSRF token cookie. And if we can read the value of that and use that in our request, we can piggyback on the request here. So then we don't have to provide a. So if we copy that value and come over here, say no authorization header, no, and then say. Just try and send that. It says, nope, you must have a. But then we can say XSRF token. I think. Oh, and it doesn't match. Or I've done something wrong. Yeah. Oh well. Never mind, moving quickly on. So, yeah. Online. So, if you want to talk to online and you are not part of, so you're not going through the front channel, not going through sort of super ID's little redirect dance, but you want to talk from your server to the REST API, you need to use a ticket, SO ticket, and then a ticket value. And then how you get that ticket is up to you, basically. Easiest way is to talk to the WCF SO principal, and so on. You need to provide an app token. This is not your app ID, which is the one that's public. This is the app token, which is secret. You're not supposed to share with anyone. And if once you have those two, then you can request things from the REST API, and it'll respond as normal. So this is the one case where you don't need to use an access token to talk to online. Okay? You seem confused.
A little, you still need the app token to do any requests against online.
Yeah.
So you need to have a registered app.
You must have a registered app, yes.
Yeah. So
There's no, yeah, you can't get around, you must have an app ID in order to talk to online.
even with the
No, with the XSRF, you piggybacking on the user's session. So in that case, the user's already logged in, and you are so your requests can't come from a server. They are coming from kind of some script or something that's running loaded off of the same site. So in that case, it's like basically it's inside the browser. There's no way for the the XSRF stuff is essentially for web pages that are loaded off of the same site as the web application. So if you have an on-site installation and you don't want to sort of have a separate login or something, you can sort of piggyback off of the existing one. This is mostly useful for things like web panels or stuff like that wants to live inside the existing user interface. And that's essentially what we're going to use it for. It's like we want to talk to a web API from some part of the user interface in CRM Web, we don't want to have to pop up a dialog to say log in, or it's like we're already logged in. We should be able to, get that information without a lot of extra work. So if you can make your app kind of live as close to the server and sort of, then this is useful for you. Pretty much all other circumstances, not so useful. So, and in online, it's not useful because you can't get near our servers. Our servers are guarded, heavily guarded. Okay, so implicit flow. I went through this last year, but I'm sure you've all forgotten how it works. You basically start off by going to SuperID, asking for authorization, and you say, I want a token back. Here is my client ID. So this is not your client, this is not the secret, but your sort of public identifier, because this stuff goes out over the internet to the client. And then it says redirect, when you're finished authorizing, go back to this URL with some additional information. So having provided all that information, the browser will either show a login page or it will redirect back. It'll kind of go like, oh, you're already logged in. We'll send you back without any further ado. But if you're not logged in, up comes a little login page that the user has to deal with, and then once they're authenticated, then we can ship you back an application, sort of an app token, access token. Sorry. So SuperID creates an access token that's valid for some amount of time, 30 minutes or something. And then it redirects the browser back to the place that you asked for. And that place has to be on a list of sort of approved URLs. You have to register where your app can go. So there's a whitelist. So you can't hijack this to sort of redirect the access token wherever you want. It has to be to one of your pre-approved URLs. And it builds this ginormous string after the hash that the JavaScript on your app can then parse out. So you can go, okay, well, here's my access token. Well, here's when it expires. Here's my sort of customer ID and where I can find the the endpoints to talk to this, and so on. And this is all stuff you set up when you're defining your application. And then your JavaScript basically has to kind of parse over that, pull out the required values, and then you can start talking to the web API using the access token. And then once the access token expires, you have to use a little iframe, essentially, to go get a new one. Does that make sense? Sort of, yeah, sort of, kind of. Let's take a look at how this works. So if we go back here, boop, away with you. So if we, let's see, and console there. There we go. So if we now try and call the API directly, no authentication, it says basically no. Not allowed. Forbidden. So we should sign in. So I'd already signed in. Huh, that went very quickly. So then, eek. Stop doing that. Oh, I have bumped into there. Sorry about that. So then we've got back this giant access token, and so on. And then we can now go call the REST API again, and we get back a value. Let's see if we go talk to this one. There we go. This is our little playground. If we go look at project, there's our project with ID 2. It says, hello, expand world. So if I sign out from here, we should. I'll try and call it. Access token is still valid. Let's see. Reload that page. Now if I sign in, now it says, you're not signed in. Here's a login dialog. Please deal with that. What password did I use? And we come back again here. And so, yeah, he's still working. So does that sort of make things any clearer for people, what's going on? So you have to redirect off to Super ID, and it will maybe display a dialog and then redirect back to you. And you have to do a bunch of JavaScript work to pull out the values. And question?
Yeah. I don't know if I missed anything, but as I see this, it's not possible to refresh the token without the user interaction to log in again. Or?
Yes, you can. So you can say update the access token, and that goes off. That does basically the refresh in an iframe. So it has a little iframe. It says, okay, iframe, go to Super ID, and because you're logged in already, you know that it's not going to pop up a sign-in dialog.
But how about if I have let's say a Chrome job running in a PHP script, which I then save ticket to a database when the user logs in initially
Yeah.
the application?
So if you're saving the access tokens to a database, you are doing it wrong.
Okay.
Because the access tokens expire fairly quickly.
Yeah, exactly.
So don't save them to a database. Don't do that. It's like you can, but they will stop working.
Yeah.
And then you will have to annoy the user.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but if you, once you have one, you can update that one. You can say, here we say, okay, there's one. We can go update it, and it gets a new one. See?
Yeah.
And see over here.
That requires a browser session, right?
Yes, you must have a browser. So dealing with access tokens is all about dealing with browsers and redirecting back and forth. So if you're building a JavaScript app or something, this is the way to deal with sort of talking to. If you're sitting on a server, then you want to talk to the WCF to get a ticket and use the ticket. The ticket lasts a lot longer, and
But if I combine if I make a function to get a ticket
Mhm.
in the WCF
Yep.
services, then I can also use that for REST API.
yes, yeah.
Super. Okay.
Yeah, a ticket is a ticket. It's
Yeah,
good
yeah.
everywhere.
So that would work. As
You
well.
could, in theory, paste it into the login dialog, and
Yeah.
at least on site, you can paste it into the login dialog and get in.
So this is basically only for browser session, and if I have a
Yes.
background service, I would use the WCF.
Mm-hmm.
Super.
Yep.
Thank you.
At least until we get refresh tokens and like sort of the other OAuth flows working.
Yeah.
But for now, no. Okay. So content negotiation. This goes to, and I'm out of time. We'll power through the last bit, and then there's I think lunch. So content negotiation, we have JSON and XML. So basically all of these things support, give me a, let's see, accept, you know, application JSON, or give me, you know, application XML. Depending on what you ask for, you get different results back. Languages, this is the thing you were asking about earlier. So if you send an accept language header, we will try and parse all the strings we get back into that language as best we can. If we can't find that language exactly, you'll probably get English. If you say accept language star, like basically tells us don't translate anything. Just give me the raw sort of untranslated strings. But for the most part, it'll sort of automatically pull out the right results for you. And then finally, cores. This is one of those annoyances. This is a browser-specific problem, so for server to server, like if you're sitting on the back end, this is not a problem. But for browsers don't want to, they don't want sort of pages to call arbitrary other pages. Like that's considered a security hole. So before a web page, so you download a web page from, in this case, appexample.com. And the browser will then say, okay, great, you can talk back to your own server, and you cannot talk to other servers unless they allow you. So before the web page, like a JavaScript on that page, which is downloaded from app, before it can call to SuperOffice, SO, which is a different host name, before it's allowed to do an AJAX call there, the browser will do a little pre-flight. They call it pre-flight request. It'll do options on that URL that you're trying to call, and the URL will send back a list of things which are allowed to talk to it. So it says like, oh, allow example.com to talk to me. So as long as the page came from a place which is on the allow origin list of URLs, then the call is allowed. If it's not there, then the browser will block it and say, no, you cannot. And there's a special, star basically means allow everything. So, but since we're allowed, then the actual call goes through. So if you have cores disabled, which basically means don't allow calls from other servers at all, then those get blocked. You can also, there's a config file setting for kind of a list of URLs that you're going to allow to talk to your web API. And so if your server is not on there, or if it's misspelled or something, then you will get this lovely error message. It says, request cannot load, blah, blah, blah. Response to pre-flight request doesn't pass access control check. Origin is not allowed access. Response blocked. So if your JavaScript app is not working, this is probably why. And open up the console to see all of the lovely error messages. Binary blobs. We mentioned this earlier. Images on person, project, product, document contents. You can go get them. You can post to them or put to them. And you can update them. So there's no wrappers around this stuff. It's raw data. To-dos. I'm sure we have some lovely things to do. Quotes. Quotes are still not in there. Those are trickier than one would think. We end up with very long and ugly URLs. So I have suggestions welcome on how to do quotes properly. ERP sync is still not sort of included. The consent stuff, we need to do some work on. HTTP patch would be a good thing to have in there, so you do partial updates. That's not in yet. Having favorites, for example, would be a nice thing to have. Webhooks, having the server kind of call out when things happen, that would be very useful, I think. Anything else?
Maybe I missed it, but what about shipment, ticket, and message?
Oh, those are service things, and apparently they don't care about APIs. So yeah, no, those would be cool, but having those in would require moving that stuff over to net server and so on. So that's like rewriting, yeah, so that's at least next year. Yeah. Anything else? Nope. Good. Thank you for your patience.